Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. Chapter 14, in which Phileas Fogg descends the entire splendid valley of the Ganges without ever thinking of looking at it. The bold abduction had succeeded. An hour after Passepartout was still laughing at his success, Sir Francis Cromarty grasped the hand of the brave fellow. His master said to him, "Good," which in that gentleman's mouth was equivalent to high praise, to which Passepartout replied that all honour of the affair belonged to his master. As for him, he had only the droll idea, and laughed in thinking for a few moments that he, Passepartout, the former gymnast, ex-surgeon of firemen, had been the widower of a charming woman, and an old embalmed Raja. As for the young Indian widow, she had no knowledge of what passed. Wrapped up in travelling clothes, she rested in one of the howdahs. Meanwhile, the elephant, guided with great certainty by the Parsee, moved on rapidly through the still dark forest. 1 hour after it left the pagoda Pillai, he shot across with the immense plain. At the 7 o'clock they halted. The young woman was still in the state of complete prostration. The guide made her a drink and a few swallows of water and brandy, but the stupefying influence which overwhelmed her continued for some time longer. Sir Francis Cromarty, who knew the effects of intoxication produced by inhalation of fumes of hemp, had no uneasiness on her account. But if the restoration of the young woman was not a question in the General's mind, he would not be less assured for the future, and did not hesitate to say to Phileas Fogg that Mrs. Aouda remained in India, she would inevitably fall again into the hands of her executioners. These fanatics were scattered throughout the entire peninsula, and notwithstanding the English police, they would certainly be able to recapture their victim, whether at the Madras, Bombay, or Calcutta. And in support of this remark, Sir Francis quoted a fact on the nature that really transpired. According to his view, the young man would not really be safe until after leaving India. Phileas Fogg replied that he would note these remarks and think them over. Towards 10 o'clock the guide announced the station of Allahabad. The uninterrupted line of the railway recommenced there, once the train traversed. In less than a day and night the distance separated Allahabad from Calcutta. Phileas Fogg ought then to arrive in time to take the steamer, and would not leave until next day, October 25th, at noon, for Hong Kong. The young woman was placed in a waiting room of the station. Passepartout was directed for a purchase for various articles of dress, such as robes, shawls, furs, etc., whatever he would find. His master opened an unlimited credit for him. Passepartout went out immediately and ran through the streets. Allahabad, that is, the city of God, is one of the most venerated of India, of account of it being built by the junction of two sacred rivers, the Ganges and the Jumna, whose water attracted pilgrims from the whole peninsula. It is said also that, according to the legends of Ramayana, the Ganges takes its source in the heaven, whence, thanks to Brahma, it descends upon the earth. In making his purchases, Passepartout had soon seen the city, at one time defended by a magnificent fort, which he which had become a state prison, which are no more commerce and no more manufactures in the city, formerly a manufacturing commercial point. Passepartout, who vainly sought a variety shop, such as there was a Regent City a few steps off, was Farmer and Co., found only at the second-hand dealer, a whimsical Jew, in the objects which he needed, a dress for a Scotch stuff, a large mantle, and a magnificent otter-skin pelisse, for which he did not hesitate to pay £75. Then, quite triumphant, he returned to the station. Mrs. Aouda commenced to revive, and which influence to each of the priests of Pillaja had subjected her, disappeared by degrees, and her beautiful eyes resumed all their Indian softness. When the poet king, Ulcaf Ordal, celebrates the charm of the Queen of Agamemnon, he expressed himself. Her shining tress, regularly divided into two parts, encircled the harmonious outlines of her delicate and white cheeks, brilliant with their flow and freshness. Her ebony eyebrows have formed on the strength of the bow of Kama, god of love. In her long silken lashes and the black pupil of her limpid eyes there float, as the sacred lakes of Himalaya, the purest reflection of the celestial light. Fine, regular, and white, her teeth shine out between her smiling lips, like dewdrops in a half-closed bosom of a pomegranate blossom. Her ears, types of symmetrical curves, her rosy hands, her little feet, her curve and tender as lotus buds, shine with the most splendor of finest pearls of Ceylon, the most beautiful diamonds of Golconda, her delicate and supple waist, as which a hand can clasp, heighten the elegant outline of the prime displays of its most perfect treasures, and under silken folds of her tunic seemed to have modeled in pure silver by the divine of Vikmara, the immortal sculptor. But without all this poetic implication, it is sufficient to say that Miss Auda, the widow of Raha of Bundelkund, was a charming woman in the European acceptation of praise. She spoke English with great purity, and the guide had not exaggerated in asserting that this young Parsee woman had been transformed by education. Meanwhile, the train was about to leave for Allahabad. The Parsee was waiting. Mr. Fogg paid him the had compensation agreed upon, and while exceeding it a farthing, this astonished this astonished Passepartout a little, who everything knew everything that his master owed to his devotion of the guide. The Parsee, in fact, had risked his life voluntarily in the affair of Fallujah. If later the Hindus should learn it, he would hardly escape their vengeance. The question of Keone also remained. Would he be done with an elephant bought so dearly? But Phileas Fogg had already taken a resolution upon his point. Parsee, he said to the guide, you have been serviceable and devoted, and I paid for your service, but not for your devotion. Do you wish this elephant? It is yours. The eyes of the guide sparkled. Your honour's giving me fortune, he cried. Accept, guide, replied Mr. Fogg, and I will yet be your debtor. Good, cried Passepartout. Take him, friend. Kearney is brave and courageous animal. He was gonna say to the brave, he gave some lumps of sugar, saying, here, Kearney, here, here. The elephant uttered some grunts of satisfaction, then taking Passepartout by the waist, encircling him with his trunk, and raised him high as his head. Passepartout was not at all frightened, caressed the animal, who replaced him gently on the ground, and shaking of the honest Keone's trunk, there answered a vigorous shaking of the good fellow's hand, and a moment after, Phileas Fogg, Sir Francis Cromarty, and Passepartout, seated in the comfortable car, in the best seat in which Mrs. Auda occupied, were running at full speed towards Benar. 80 miles at the most separated this place from Allahabad, and they were passed over 2 hours. During this passage the young woman was completely revived, and the drowsy fumes of the bang disappeared. What was her astonishment to find herself on this railway, in this compartment, clothed in European habiliments, in the midst of other travellers entirely unknown to her. At first her companions gave her the greatest care, and revived her with a few drops of liquor. Then the Brigadier General told her the story. He dwelt with the devotion of Phileas Fogg, who did not hesitate to stake his life to save her, upon the denouement of the venture, due to the bold imagination of Passepartout. Mr. Fogg let him go on without saying a word. Passepartout, quite ashamed, repeated that it was not worth while. Mrs. Audu thanked her deliverers profusely, by her tears and more by her words. Her beautiful eyes, rather than lips, were interpreters of gratitude. Then, her thoughts carrying her back to the scene of the duty, seeing again the Indian country where so many dangers awaited her, she shuddered with terror. Phileas Fogg understood what passing in Mr. Audu's mind, and to reassure her offered, very coolly, to take her to Hong Kong, where she might remain until this affair had died out. Miss Auda accepted the offer gratefully. At Hong Kong there resided one of her relatives, a Parsee like herself, and one of the principal merchants of that city, which is entirely English, though occupying a point of the Chinese coast. At 12:30 noon the train stopped at Benares station. The Brahmin legends asserted that this place occupied the site of the ancient Kasi, which was formerly suspended in space. In the zenith nadir, like Muhammad's tomb. But at this more material period, Benares, the Athens of India, in saying the Orientals, was prosaically resting on earth. And Passepartout could for an instant see its brick houses, its clay huts, which gave it a very desolate appearance, without any local colour. Here was where Sir Francis Cromarty was going to stop. The troops, he said he was rejoining, were camping a few miles to the north of the city. The Brigadier General then made his adieu to Phileas Fogg, wishing him all possible success, and expressing the wishes he would recommence the journey in a less original but more profitable manner. Mr. Fogg pressed lightly his companion's finger. Parting, the greeting of Mrs. Auda was more demonstrative. She would never forget what she owed to Sir Francis Cromarty. As for Passepartout, he was honoured with a hearty shake of the hand by the General. Quite affected, he asked where and what he would be of service to him. Then they parted. Leaving Benares, the railway followed in the part of the valleys of the Ganges, and through the windows of the car the weather became quite clear. Appeared the very country of Bahar, mountains covered in verdure, and fields of barley, corn, and wheat, full of green alligators, villages well kept, and forests as yet green. A few elephants in zebus with a few humps. Yet they came and bathe in the water of the sacred river, and notwithstanding the advanced season, or already the cold temperature, the bands of Hindus of both sexes were imperiously performing their holy ablutions. These faithful ones, the bitter enemies of Buddhism, are fervent secretaries of Brahmin religion, which are incarnate of these three persons: Vishnu, the solar deity; Shiva, the divine personification of natural forces; and Brahma, the supreme master of priests and legislators. But in what light would Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu regard this India, now Britanized, with some steamboat past, puffing and disturbing the consecrated waters of the Ganges, frightening the gull flying over its surface, the turtle swarming on its bank, and faithful stretched upon its shores? All this panorama passed like a flash, and frequently a cloud of steam concealed its detail from them. The travellers could scarcely see the fort of Chunar, 20 miles from the southeast of Benares, an old stronghold of the Rajas of Bihar, Gazpur and its large rose-water manufactories. The tomb of the Lord Cornwallis rising on the left banks of Ganges. The fortified town of Buxar, Patna, the great manufacturing commercial city, where the principal optimum of market in India held. Rangir, a more European town as the English as Manchester or Birmingham, famous for its iron foundries, its manufactories of cutlery whose high chimneys cover with black smoke and heavens of Brahma, a real fist blow in the country of dreams. Then night came, in a mist of howling of tigers, bears, and the wolves, which fled before the locomotive. The train passed on at full speed, and they saw nothing of the wonders of Bengal, Golconda, or Gordon ruins, or Moorshedabad, the former capital of Burswan, or Holi, or Chandernagor, the French point in Indian territory on which Passepartout would have been proud to see his native flag floating. Finally, at 7 o'clock a.m., Calcutta was reached. The steamer was to leave for Hong Kong if he did not weigh anchor until noon. Phileas Fogg then had 5 hours before him. According to his journal, this gentleman should arrive in the capital of India, October 25th. 23 days after leaving London, he arrived there on the stipulated day. He was neither nor ahead of time. Unfortunately, the 2 days gained by him between London and Bombay had been lost. We know how, in this trip across the Indian peninsula, but it is to be supposed that Phileas Fogg did not regret them.